Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally popping the hood on human consciousness to figure out the true nature of our own minds. For most of us, thinking feels so automatic, so, incredibly familiar, that we rarely stop to ask what's actually happening up there. But today, we're going to dismantle a deeply held assumption about how our brains work. So get ready, because by the end of this explainer, you might never look at your own mind the exact same way again.
All right, do me a quick favor, take just a second right now and actively listen to your internal monologue. You probably hear a voice, narrating, maybe rehearsing what you're going to do after this, or just repeating what I'm saying. Words are appearing, sentences are forming. It feels exactly like a dialogue inside your head, right? But here is the big question. Is that voice, that running commentary of language, the exact same thing as your thinking process? Most of us would instinctively say yes, for sure.
And, that brings us to this universally accepted assumption. Because the experience is just so familiar to us, it's incredibly easy to treat it as definitive fact. The logic goes like this. If thinking feels like words, then thinking is words. The movement of language basically becomes the movement of thought itself. And this isn't just some casual assumption either. This idea has deep historical roots in both philosophy and psychology. For centuries, some of the most brilliant thinkers have described reasoning as just a form of internal discourse, right? Like a sequence of statements unfolding in the privacy of our own awareness. It's a really intuitive image. But as we're about to see, there's a subtle ambiguity here that almost everyone completely overlooks.
Okay, let's dive right into section 1, the inner voice illusion, origin versus expression. To really wrap our heads around this illusion, we've got to separate where a thought starts from how it's expressed. Just because our thoughts can be expressed in words doesn't actually mean they originate as words. Think about that super frustrating tip of the tongue phenomenon. You know the feeling. You're mid-sentence, you know exactly what you want to say, but the words totally fail to capture your intended meaning. There's a pause, a little hesitation. You recognize that what you just said wasn't quite right. Now, why does this matter? Well, think about it. If the words are insufficient, there must be something they're failing to express. That something is basically a glitch in the matrix. It proves that meaning exists way before language. The thought is already there, just waiting for the right words to catch up.
So, moving on to section 2, meaning before words and the cognitive gap.
So, if your thoughts aren't actually made of words, what the heck are they made of? Well, cognitive scientist Steven Pinker points to this fascinating concept called mentalaise. When we experience that awkward gap between what we intend to say and what we actually blurt out, it suggests our intended meaning exists in a form that isn't fully linguistic yet. Now, mentalaise isn't a literal language with verbs and nouns like English or Spanish. Instead, it's a representational system. It's basically the underlying structure of our intentions, where meanings get organized before they ever get spoken or written down. Think of speaking as actually, scratch that. Think of it more as a lightning-fast translation process. You're constantly converting mentalize, your raw intent, the pure representation of the idea, into language, which is the expression. Usually, it's seamless. But occasionally the translation completely falters, and that is exactly when you experience that tip-of-the-tongue moment. Language isn't the origin of the thought, it's just the translation of it.
All right, section 3, thinking without language or non-linguistic cognition.
Now, if you're still a bit skeptical, let's look at some undeniable proof of high-level cognition happening completely in the dark, totally without words. First up, infants. Long before they learn to speak, they understand object permanence. The fact that a toy still exists even when it's hidden under a blanket. They track objects and anticipate outcomes based purely on perception and interaction. Second, consider animals. Countless species navigate incredibly complex environments and solve puzzles without any human language. And finally, in adults, the psychologist Roger Shepard proved that people can visually rotate complex mental images in their heads to solve spatial problems. This visual reasoning unfolds entirely without verbal narration. So, the absence of words absolutely does not imply the absence of cognition.
The absolute crucial point here is summed up perfectly by none other than Albert Einstein. He explicitly stated that words didn't play any role in his mechanism of thought. No way, right? Instead, Einstein relied on signs and more or less clear images that he could voluntarily reproduce and combine. For literally one of the greatest minds in human history, language only entered the process at a much later stage, when his brilliant ideas actually needed to be communicated to the rest of the world.
Now, what's really wild is this condition called anendophasia. There are humans walking around right now who operate perfectly, reason logically, and plan complex futures with absolutely zero inner voice. They don't hear words internally at all. They just experience a direct sense of meaning or intention. Their thinking proceeds in forms that are much harder to describe linguistically, but they are absolutely no less functional. If some people can think perfectly well without an inner voice, it proves once and for all that language is just not a mandatory condition for thought.
Which brings us to Section 4, Language as a Tool, Shaping the Mind.
So if language isn't the actual substance of our thoughts, what exactly is it doing? Lev Vygotsky's theory offers a really clear 1-2-3 progression here. Step 1, language starts purely as social communication. Kids learn to speak just to get what they need from the people around them. Step 2, over time, this external interface gets internalized. And step 3, it transforms into what we call inner speech. But it's not just a copy of external language, it condenses. It ties directly to our personal patterns of thought. It moves from being this external tool to an internal scaffolding.
I absolutely love this quote from Vygotsky. The relation of thought to word is not a thing, but a process, a continual back and forth. This perfectly emphasizes that language is just a magnificent tool. We use it to organize, stabilize, and extend our thoughts in this dynamic, ongoing interaction. It allows us to hold ideas in a durable form so we can examine them and share them. Language has become deeply integrated into our cognition, sure, but as we know, a tool is not identical to the activity it supports.
Finally, let's pull this all together in Section 5, the depths of the mind, surface versus depth.
Think of human cognition as having a surface level and a deep level. The inner voice is really merely the surface layer. It gives us articulation, continuity, and a sense of conscious control. But beneath that surface is a vast depth of underlying cognition. We're talking meaning, spatial reasoning, affect, and raw intention. Now, this doesn't mean the inner voice is diminished or unimportant. Not at all. It just means that language is merely the surface interface we use to engage with a much, much deeper cognitive ocean.
So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Think about your own mind right now. That inner voice you hear is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a tool shaping a process that unfolds far, far beyond the reach of words. If words are just the surface of your thoughts, what lies in your depths? What nonverbal intentions, abstract images, and spatial realities are operating in the dark up there right now? It's a fascinating space to explore, isn't it? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.
Thank you for watching. If something in this resonated with you, then you're already closer than you think. If you're ready to go deeper, there's a link below to my book, Before Thought: How the Mind Constructs Reality Before You Know It. This isn't theory, it's a framework you can actually use. Tap the link below and step into it.